How are we doing, folks? Your host Moose here, back on the Pitt Panthers Football Network with our Around the NCAA review of Week 3 in National College Football. Of course, in the ACC, your Pitt Panthers did fall, unfortunately, to the Florida State Seminoles away in Tallahassee by a 48-45 score in double overtime. So a really just heartbreaking loss in that manner, but it was good to see the Panthers put up a fight. Clemson with a big win. Wake Forest with an easy win over UL Monroe. Georgia Tech improves to 1-0 in the ACC, beating Duke. Miami just escaped Florida in a really big 21-22 rivalry match with an overtime field goal by Badgley, giving them the 2017 victory. Boston College added more misery to USC's woeful start to the season with a 41-21 drubbing. So the Eagles come out looking very solid in that one. Louisville, behind the strength of 4 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson, 3 passing, 1 rushing, escape rivals Kentucky. Syracuse with a big easily victory over an FCS opponent. North Carolina just escapes Colorado State, and NC State comes away with an easy victory against Central Michigan. In the NCAA, of course, your big games: Florida State beating Pitt, TCU with a win, Iowa State upsetting Iowa with a 36-31 victory. The Hawkeyes fall from the ranks of the unbeaten. Auburn upsetting number 23 Mississippi State as well. Your game of the week: Michigan with a fantastic victory over Notre Dame. I say fantastic as a Pitt fan. We're not huge on Notre Dame over here. There's no doubt about that. But a big victory, 43-40 for Michigan. Tennessee obliterates Oregon in a 45-17 just drubbing. So they wipe the floor with Oregon. Alabama in a massive shootout with Texas A&M comes away with a 48-45 victory. So another 48-45 contest. This one straight in regulation. Trevor Knight with 646 yards passing for Texas A&M and still comes away with the loss. Jalen Hurts with 442 and 3 touchdowns in the victory for Alabama. It was an unbelievable contest, but Alabama comes away with the win. Texas upsets Ole Miss and improves to 2-0 with a 27-21 victory as well. Your players of the week: Michael Rosa, Ivy, defensive side of the ball, 3 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss, and forced a fumble for Nebraska. And Michael Weber, about 208 yards and 4 touchdowns for Ohio State. Over on the ACC side, Jack Tocho for NC State on the defensive side with a pick, and Florida State's quarterback DeAndre Francois against your Pitt Panthers. And now, of course, we look at the Heisman voting. Trevor Knight is possibly at the top of that leaderboard after that unbelievable performance in the loss against Bama. Mike Weber, the running back for Ohio State, moving up the board with a 200-yard, 4-touchdown performance. Nick Chubb still there after 2 more touchdowns in an easy victory against North Texas. And Josh Dobbs from Tennessee joins the ranks of the possible Heisman contenders. We take a look now at the top 25 poll around the NCAA. Of course, we look at the coaches poll, the only one available to us. Alabama, number 1, remains there after their victory. Clemson stays at 2. Oklahoma, a tight victory against Ohio, but they stay at number 3. Michigan up to 4th. Florida State actually loses a poll position because of their tight game against Pittsburgh, whereas Michigan had the win against ranked Notre Dame, so they'll jump forward. Ohio State falls back up to place. Stanford 7, Tennessee 8, TCU up to 9th, Washington up to 10th, LSU up to 11th after their tight win against Missouri. Georgia up to 13th, Houston 12th. Notre Dame falls to 14th from 9th after their loss to Michigan. UCLA stays. Louisville up, Baylor up, Miami up 4 spots to 18 after their win against Florida, who dropped back to number 24. Texas into the rankings, up 6 spots from the unranked, now to 19th after their win against Ole Miss. Oregon actually stays at 20th in spite of losing pretty handily to Tennessee, so shocking they didn't lose any position there. Ole Miss back to 21. Arizona State into the rankings at 22. Oklahoma State to 23 after a big win. They'll take on Pitt this week. Florida's dropped back to 24th, and Texas A&M back to 25th. Your Pitt Panthers are still receiving votes. They're going to be in, I believe that will be 32nd, 33rd place, somewhere in that neighborhood. I believe 33rd in the nation after losing to Florida State. So they do have a big matchup coming up, though. So with that loss, Pitt, unfortunately, is 0-1 in the conference. Georgia Tech, the only one in the ACC Coastal with a conference win. But every team still with basically their entire conference schedule to play. Wake and Florida State on top of the Atlantic. But once again, lots of conference games to come in the remainder of the weeks the rest of this season. So lots of games to be played. So we take a look at the top games coming up in this week. Florida State taking on Louisville, a number 5 versus 16 battle, and Kirk Herbstreit taking the Seminoles after the strength of that victory against Pitt to come away with another win. Florida taking on Tennessee, so another big game for both the Vols and Florida, taking on ranked opponents for the second week in a row, and Herbstreit does have Tennessee projected to come away with the victory on Rocky Top and continue their undefeated start. Arizona State taking on Stanford. Stanford, number 7 in the country. Of course, Christian McCaffrey is projected to come away with the win by Kirk Herbstreit. Ohio State also with a big matchup against Nebraska. Ohio State is projected to come away with the win there. But for your Pitt Panthers, they're taking on Oklahoma State in Stillwater, so it's going to be a very, very tough away matchup for the Panthers, taking on the Cowboys, who have, gone off to an okay start. They lost their first matchup, but then they came away with an obliteration of an FCS opponent, 51-10 in their last matchup. Herbstreit is actually taking your Pitt Panthers to come away with the win. They're battle-tested, 2 big wins, beating Penn State, of course, and Marshall, and then a tight loss to Florida State, so they've looked very good. Mason Rudolph, though, will have something to say about, of course, the Oklahoma State quarterback, put up 2 touchdowns, whereas Hill, 3 touchdowns, 265 yards on the ground for Oklahoma State last week. So there's going to be where the Panthers are going to want to shut down that rushing attack of Oklahoma State and make them beat them through the air as they try to do. But Mason Rudolph, 89 rated quarterback, something that they're really going to have to contend with. Barry Sanders' son, of course, is the starting running back for Oklahoma State, whereas Hill had the 265-yard performance, but he's the backup. So look for those two to alternate carries throughout the matchup for the Cowboys. Washington and Ademan, 2 very, very capable receivers. They're going to be great targets for Mason Rudolph throughout the day, of course, as well as their tight end Jarwin, who is a fantastic pro prospect. There's no doubt about that. So really some big targets for Rudolph to throw to. Hopefully the Panthers will be able to get pressure, though, as Oklahoma State doesn't have the best offensive line. Their number 1 offensive lineman, right tackle Crabtree, is going to be out injured for this matchup. So hopefully the Panthers can get to Rudolph and really cause him some issues. Vincent Taylor, defensive tackle to watch out. A solid linebacking core, nothing spectacular for Oklahoma State. So you'd expect the Panthers offense to be able to do well. The secondary is really the strength of this Oklahoma State defense, but the Panthers ground game should get the ball moving for them. There's no doubt about that. The key for Oklahoma State, though, no doubt has to be if Mason Rudolph can get this passing attack going and really take it to a Panthers secondary that has not been really successful in the early going. But our projection for this matchup is that the Panthers, we're going to go along with Kirk Herbstreit. We see the Panthers come away with a 38-35 victory against Oklahoma State. That Pitt offense, after decent performances against Marshall and Penn State, has really come alive in the matchup against Florida State. We expect them to continue that against a much less stout Oklahoma State defense, and we see the Pitt defense just breaking, bending but not breaking, holding on for a 38-35 win. Let us know what you think will happen in the big games this week, as well as the Pitt-Oklahoma State game, in the comments, and we'll see you after the game. Take care. Bye-bye.